Got it. And more.
Morning.
Morning, Kayvon.
Morning, Rabbi.
I was wondering how he got that.
What's going on right now?
I was wondering how he got that white screen effect.
Yeah, just the backdrop.
Just an extra.
That's it.
Everything, you just come in and you figure it out. It's like it's a gimmick.
Process.
Everything's a process. Everything's a little.
Like the early Mama's shearing, there was no backdrop. The window.
Was it just against the? Okay, you tell me when. It's
Yeah, I'll minus it for you and then we're good to go. Make sure it's muted. Yeah. Just don't worry about the YouTube.
Wait, why? It feeds delayed.
There's guys, there's no sound.
All right. Kayvon,
Okay,
can you
great.
hear us?
Yes,
All right.
sir. Thank you.
You ready to go?
Ready to go. All right. Good morning.
Morning.
We are doing today's Rambam Hilchos Kidush Hachodesh Perik Tes Yud and Yud Aleph. Rabbi Zions is out of town. He asked me to take over. I'm honored. There's a lot to do today, so let's get right to it. Just the 2 words of introduction before we go into today's prakim. Every day we observe sunrise and sunset. We see the sunrise in the east, the sun sets in the west. But of course, that's not the whole story. That's what the Rambam calls in Hilchos Yosei Torah the Galgal Hayomi, the daily Galgal, the sphere that stands outside of all of reality and is pushing the whole existence from due east to due west. At the same time, simultaneously, there's another thing happening, which is that the sun and the moon themselves are crawling from west to east in their own orbit. The sun goes very, very slow, 1 degree per day, and the moon goes about 13 degrees per day. That's the orbit that we're focused on in these halachas, essentially. We're worried about the sun and the moon on their own path, how they're progressing from west to east, where they're going to be at Shkia on the night following the Mailad, so that we can determine whether we're going to see the moon or not. The basic idea is that it takes the sun an entire year to get around Earth. If it goes 1 degree per day, a little less than a degree per day, it takes about 365 days for the sun to go around the Earth. The moon, because it's going so fast at 13 degrees, goes much faster, pretty much every month, completing a full revolution. If we added up 12 lunar revolutions, 12 times that the moon went around the Earth, we basically come to 354 days that the Rambam said yesterday. So you have a difference of 11 days because it takes the sun to get around 365 days in sun. And the moon is getting around 12 times for a year in 354 days. That creates a discrepancy of 11 days. So some people, some calendars, just go with the solar. Like the secular calendar, 365 days, easy. We only follow the sun. Every couple of years, we have a February 29th to make up for the cumulative hours over 365. But that's it. It's a solar calendar. The Muslims, they go with the lunar calendar. For them, 12 lunar months is a year, finished. the thing is with the Yidden is that we have to have lunar calendars, lunar months. The moon dictates when the month is. At the same time, we have a mitzvah that Pesach has to fall in the spring. So we have to follow the sun because the sun dictates the seasons. What would happen is if you decided to have a new year after 12 lunar months, while the sun still hasn't finished the revolution around the earth, not all the seasons are finished. So the new lunar year would start before the fourth season ended. And ultimately the accumulations would accumulate to the point that different months in the year could be in all different seasons. So we have to follow both the sun and the moon. And that's why every couple of years we have a leap year. We insert another lunar month to the year. Now we have 13 months, and that differential between the sun and the moon kind of aligns. The question is, how long does it actually take the sun to get around the earth? Only once we know exactly how long it takes the sun to complete its revolution can we determine how much the discrepancy between the sun and the moon is. Because the moon's revolution, we know. The Rambam says it's 29 days, 12 hours, 793 chalakim. That's how long it takes for the moon to get around the earth. That's undebated. But with the sun, how long does it actually take the sun to get around and complete a full cycle? Only once we know that can we figure out how much difference there is between 12 lunar months and a solar year. So that's,
Didn't we say a year?
so we said a year, but how long is that year? So we said 365, but we're going to see there's a little difference in exactly how much over that 365, which is going to cause major ripple effects. And essentially, Perek Tes and Yud are two opinions on that question. Two opinions on how long the solar year is. And basically 15 differences that come out as a result of which way you hold. If you hold one way, Perek Tes is one way, we're going to see 15 different results on that. And Perek Yud, you hold a little differently, all the results change. So let's get right to it. Perek Tes, Halacha Aleph, Shnas HaChama, the solar year. Yesh mechachmi Yisrael sha'imrim, some of the sages of Israel say, She'ish lo yishmeis chamisha v'shishin yoim u'revi'a yoim, that it's exactly 365 days and a quarter of a day, Shu sheish shois, 6 hours. Yesh man sha'imrim, others say, this is going to be expounded on in Perek Yud, Shehu pachis me'revi'a hayayim, that it's a bit less than a quarter of a day. Similarly, the sages of Greece and the sages of Persia also argued about this. So the Rambam starts with the opinion that it's 365 days and a quarter. This in the Gemara is called Tkufas Shmuel. Shmuel's opinion of how the solar year works. So the Rambam right away begins with one ramification. The one who says that it's 365 days and exactly a quarter of a day. At the end of the cycle of every 19 years, there's going to still be a discrepancy of Shah Achas chalakim. 1 hour, 485 chalakim. The idea of a leap year is that every 2-3 years, you put in another lunar month to catch up to the differential between the sun and the moon's paths. So if you do the math, every 19 years, you have 12 regular years, 7 leap years. It pretty much fully aligns, except for a small remainder. 1 hour, 485, it's tiny. Really, if you think about it, 19 years is a huge amount of time. And to have just a difference of 1 hour is pretty good. The problem is 19 years times 10, times 100, times 200, we're already in over 300 cycles of 19 years that accumulates. So every machzor, every 19 years, you have what's called a she'edis, a remainder of 1 hour, 485 chalakim. As we actually already said in yesterday's Rambam. Now, v'yiyah bein tkufa litkufa echad v'tishim yoyim b'sheva shoyis v'chatzi shah. The Rambam says, according to this opinion, every season, tkufa will translate as season, has 91 days, 7.5 hours. The solar journey around the earth is divided into 4 parts. From 0 degrees to 90 degrees is 1 quarter, 90 to 180, 180 to 270, 270 to 360. Those are each called tkufas, one season. So if the solar year is a beautiful number of 365 and 6 hours, so each season divides neatly into 91 days and 7.5 hours. Once you know the beginning of one season, at what day and what hour it was, just begin to count from it to the next kufa afterwards, from second to the third, because all you have to do is add 91 days and 7.5 hours, and that's it. The truth is 91 days is divisible by 7. So if you want to know just the weekday, all you have to do is add 7.5 hours. If you know the tkufa is at Sunday night, 12 a.m., just add 7.5 hours, and Sunday morning, 7:30 a.m. is the next tkufa, because 91 days is a cycle of a couple of weeks. Halacha Gimel, Tkufas Nisan, the first season, the season of Nisan. Hi hashav hachilek is the hour and the chilek of the hour. Shetikanis be'ashemesh bereis mazal tla, where the sun goes into the beginning of the constellation of Aries, 0 degrees on the ecliptic. Utkufas Tammuz, the second season begins. Hayes hashemesh bereish mazal sartan, is when the sun is at the beginning of the constellation of Cancer, 90 degrees. Tkufas Tishrei, the third season begins. The tkufa of Tishrei is Hayes hashemesh bereish mazal miznayim, when the sun is right at the beginning of the constellation of, I think it's called Libra, the scales. With Kufas Tevis, and the fourth season, Kufas Tevis, is when the sun is at the beginning of the Mazel of Gedi, which is called what? Capricorn. I think that's the right translation for that.
Yeah.
So each year is divided into 4 Tkufas, but we're going to be mainly concerned with Tkufas Nisan. That's what we care about. The first season, when is the sun entering 0 degrees? Because that's going to dictate if we have to make a leap year or no leap year. So the Rambam tells us the following at the end of Halacha Gimel. Tkufas Nisan hoisa bashana harishayna shel yitzira lefi cheshbon zeh. According to this calculation, Tkufas Nisan, the first tkufa ever, was in year 1 of creation, koidem moilad Nisan, preceding the moilad of Nisan, b'shiva yamim b'tesha shayis b'sheish meis v'shnayim b'arba'a chalakim. 7 days, 9 hours, 642 chalakim. Simana, the simon to remember this is Zat Tarmav. Zion, of course, is 7 days. Tes is 9 hours, and Tarmav is 642 chalakim.
This is like when the world was created on Chaf Ha'el. This is the first Nisan.
Oh, so let me explain this for a second. What does this mean? That Nisan, Tkufas Nisan came before Moilad Nisan by this amount of time. There's a major machlekes in the Gemara as to when the world was created. Some say it was created in Nisan, which means Chaf Adar was the beginning of Sheshas Bereshis, and Adam was created on Friday, first day of Nisan. Others say, no, in Tishrei the world was created. Aleph Tishrei is Adam's birthday, the world's birthday is Chaf Elul. Perik Tes and Perik Yud are divided on that issue. Perik Tes is of the opinion that the world was created in Tishrei. Perik Yud was created in Nisan. If the world was created in Tishrei, so there shouldn't be anything to do with Nisan. Tishrei was year 1 of creation. The first time the moon and stars and the sun were hung into the heavens should have been end of Elul, right near Tishrei. So the answer is that, nevertheless, we do take into account theoretical time, pre-creation time. We saw yesterday that Rambam says, when we talk about a moilad, from one to the other is 29 days, 12 hours and such. The Rambam says the first moilad was on Monday, Sunday night, 11 p.m., 204 chalakim. There was no moilad on Monday. The moon only came into effect on Wednesday. It's a theoretical moilad. It's called moilad tohu. We basically make as if the world was created in Tishrei. We back up a year. What would have been the previous moilad Tishrei had there been a world in existence? And that's where we count. For computational purposes, it makes more sense mathematically to count from them. In the same way, the Gemara says, for Tkufos, for the seasons, we count from Nisan. That's the halacha. We start counting Tkufos as though the sun entered 0 degrees in Nisan. So that's theoretical time because it's 6 months before the world was created. So if we could back up 6 months in theoretical time, how much would the Tkufa of Nisan have preceded the Moilad Nisan? By 7 days and 9 hours. How so? So here, you have to rely on some of the Mefarshim. The Mefarshim tell us that the first Moilad Tishrei, post-creation, was on Friday morning at 8 a.m. Adam Rishon was created during that time. As soon as he was created, he saw the moon, he was Mekadosh the Hachodesh. So Friday morning, 8 a.m. was the first Moilad post-creation. The first Tkufa ever was Tuesday night, right in the beginning of the day. That's when Hashem hung the sun, moon, and stars into the world. Tuesday night, 6 p.m. But that was a tkufa of Nisan, because the first tkufa is always Nisan. When would the first tkufa post-creation have been? If you do the math, 91 days plus 7 hours, 91 days plus 7.5 hours, it would come out to Wednesday morning, 3 a.m.
Tishrei time?
Tishrei time.
2 kufis later?
Yeah, 15 hours. Sorry, Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Sorry, Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Because from 6 p.m. on Tuesday to 6 a.m. on Wednesday is 12 hours, a few more hours, 9 a.m. 9 a.m. on Wednesday. That gives you a differential between the Kufas Tishrei and Moilad Tishrei of 1 day and 23 hours. Now, we learned yesterday that the solar year precedes the lunar year by 11 days, something like that. Exact numbers, I think it's 10 days, 21 hours, 204 chalakim. So proportionately, after half a year, the sun's lead over the moon is half of that. 5 days, 10 hours, 642 chalakim. So follow this. If we know that post-creation, the first kufa had a lead over the first moilad at 1 day, 23 hours, if we back up a half a year to theoretical time in Nisan, we have to also add the proportional lead of the sun over the moon, 5 days, 10 hours, 642 chalakim. Well, guess what? 5, 10, 642 plus 1 day, 23 hours is 7 days, 9 hours, 642 chalakim. Hence, the Rambam says that the kufa of Nisan came before the moilad of Nisan by that amount of time. Because if you work backwards, we know the data at the end of the day. We know how much Tkufas Tishrei came before Moilad Tishrei. Extrapolating backwards, we can see that the Tkufa of Nisan came before the Moilad Nisan by 7 days, 9 hours, 642 chalakim. This is going to become important because later on, if we want to figure out a Tkufa nowadays, we're going to have to always account for that earlier lead that the sun had over the moon. Anytime I want to figure out a Tkufa today, is going to always involve subtracting that 7-day lead that the sun had over the moon. Okay, that's the bottom line.
Starting from
creation, exactly.
We're starting from
Pre-creation a little bit,
right.
The 6 months, half a year pre-creation. Yeah. By the way, there's a letter from the Rebbe where he writes that the Rambam is figuring the time of the Tkufa based on now, working backwards to the beginning of time. That basically means that the sun's cycle never changed. Ever since creation, it's moving at the same exact pace. There's a machlekes about that in the Gemara. The Yerushalmi says that clearly. Chazakim kiyemi baram. The planets are as strong and as steady as they were the day they were created. But the Medrash says that no, there was a difference. Before the Mabul, after the Mabul. So the Rebbe says it's clear that Rambam Paskins, like the Yerushalmi, that all the planetary, the planetary solar system, basically, all the planets have never changed their pace ever. Halacha dalet. Derech cheshbon tkufa kachi. So now with this in mind, the way to calculate the tkufa would be as follows. If you wanted to calculate any tkufa, you go like this. Figure out how many 19-year cycles have passed from the day of creation to the machzor that you want. Take for each of them the remainder of 1 hour, 485 chalakim, because that accumulates every 19 years. Every time the chalakim hits 180, convert it into an hour. Every time the hours hit 24, convert it into a day. Then you have to subtract from all of those remainders. Because that's the lead that the sun had over the moon pre-creation. Whatever remains after all the machzerim have accumulated, after all those hours have accumulated, you take away 7 days, add it to the moilad of Nisan, which you have to figure out separately, the first year of that cycle. It will come out for you. You will figure out what hour and which day of the month will be Tkufas Nisan, because you already know when Moilad Nisan is. That's the given of this calculation. You know when Moilad Nisan is. So you're taking all the remainders to figure out how much the sun has been leading the moon over all these 19-year cycles. Essentially, I don't want to get too into this because I think it's going to take too much time. But what the Rambam is saying here is that there was a 7-day gap between the sun and the moon pre-creation. But every 19 years, that gap is getting smaller by 1 hour, 485 chalakim, because the lunar calendar is starting its 19-year cycle 1 hour and 485 chalakim before the solar calendar. The moon is starting its new cycle a bit before. So after every cycle of 19 years, the gap is closing by 1 hour, 400 chalakim. So essentially, if you're today in the year 5782, you have to first, we're in the 300 and something's machzor. So you have to take away all those hours, bring all those hours together, the 300 hours, 300 hours and a half, so it's like 450 hours. Then subtract the 7-day lead, and that will actually give you the Tkufas Nisan. And you'll see that it actually progressed, it actually surpassed Moilad Nisan, versus pre-creation, it came before the Moilad of Nisan. By now, it's gotten closer and closer and closer till it's actually past Tkufas Moilad Nisan, which is the way we have it today. So you'll get the result of when Tkufas Nisan is in that year in the Machzor. And from there, and from there you begin to count 91 days, 7.5 hours for every tkufa, and that's it. You have it all. What if you want Tkufas Nisan of a given year in the Machzor? You don't want it at the beginning of a 19-year cycle. You want it in year 7 of the 19-year cycle. So you have to first follow the first recipe. You take 1 hour, 485 chalakim per 19-year cycle. And then, for all the years that have passed within the cycle, you take 10 days, 21 hours, 204 chalakim per year, because that's again the lead of the solar calendar over the lunar calendar each year. The kabetz hakel, bring everything together. So let's say we're in year 7 of the cycle, so 6 years have passed. We bring all these 60 days together in something, plus all the hours from the beginning of creation. And again, subtract that inherent lead of the sun over the moon, 7 days and so on. And you're left with, let's say now, 60 days, because we had all the hours accumulate. Let's say we have 60 days left. The rest you have to divide by lunar months. 29 days, 12 hours, 793 chalakim. Why are we throwing away these lunar months? Because these are the lunar months that have already been converted into leap months. They've already aligned the sun and the moon a bit during this cycle. So we don't want to count them as part of the lead of the current Tkufas Nisan over Moilad Nisan. So we throw them away. Whatever is left over, less than a lunar month, add it to the Moilad of Nisan of that year. You will know exactly when Tkufas Nisan of that given year in the cycle, how many days into the month, and what hour it will be. Says that Tkufas Nisan lefi cheshbon zeh. Since we know that the first Tkufa happened at 6 p.m. on Tuesday night, right smack at the beginning of the day, and each Tkufa goes ahead by 7.5 hours exactly. It's a very neat division. So Tkufas Nisan will always come out either 6 p.m., 12 a.m., 6 a.m., or 12 p.m. Because you go 7.5 plus 7.5 plus 7.5 plus 7.5, it's 30 hours from one year to the next year. 30 hours is 24 hours plus 6. So if it starts at 6 p.m., next time that year will be 12 a.m., etc. Tkufas Tammuz, which starts 7.5 hours after Tkufas Nisan. So if the first one is 6 p.m., the first Tkufas Tammuz is 1:30 a.m. It's either 7.5 hours or 1.5 hours into the day. 1:30 a.m., 7:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., 7:30 p.m. With Tkufas Tishrei, which is 7.5 hours after that, it's either 3 or 9 a.m. or p.m. With Tkufas Tevis, Tkufas Tevis, 7.5 hours after that is only 4:30 p.m., 4:30 a.m., 10:30 p.m., or 10:30 a.m. That's the rule, because everything divides beautifully. Now, the Rambam moves on to a different type of calculation now. Till now, we're talking about the magic number of 19. 19-year cycles, figure out all the remainder of 19-year cycles. What about the following? You don't care what day of the month the tkufa is. You want to know which day of the week it's going to be. When should I prepare for the tkufa? There were different halachas that apply for the tkufa. You couldn't have certain water open in your house. So you want to know when in the week it's going to be the tkufa. The Rambam says, now we're going to follow a bit of a different cycle. You can do the math a little bit in your head and you can realize that Tkufas Nisan, from year to year, like I said before, will be delayed by 30 hours. If you keep adding 30 hours to 30 hours, after 28 years, Tkufas Nisan will once again be on Tuesday night at 6 p.m., the same way it was. Every 28 years, the sun returns to its original position that it was by creation, which is reflected even today in halacha. We do birchas hachama every 28 years. We make a bracha when the sun comes back to Tuesday night, 6 p.m. So the Rambam says, if you only care about the weekday of the tkufa, so all you have to worry about is 28 years. Because after every 28 years, the tkufa is coming right back to where it was the first time. Kach says the Rambam, take for yourself. All the complete years that have passed since creation till the year that you want. Divide everything by 28. And only what remains after 28, that's what you have to worry about. Per year, take 30 hours, 1 day and 6 hours, because that's the advantage that Kufas Nisan moves on by every year. The Kabetz HaKol, add up all the 30-hour groups. The Hoysef Alav Shloisha, then add 3 days, because the first Kufa was on a Tuesday night. So if you want to start counting from Saturday night, you have to add first 3 days to make up for that difference. The Hashlech HaKol Shiva Shiva, divide everything by 7, so that full weeks go away. The Hanishar Min Hayamim Min Hashayis, and whatever remains from the days and from the hours, Tascha Limnes Mitchilas Lil Echad B'Shabbos, just begin counting from Saturday night, night of Sunday. And whatever the calculation reaches, Baitiyat Kufas Nisan. That's where Kufas Nisan will be. And the Rambam says explicitly, why do we add 3 days? Because the first kufa of the first year of creation was in the beginning of Wednesday. Ketzah says that Rambam, let's make this practical. We wanted to know Kufas Nisan for the year 4,930. Keep note of this year for later on in the Rambam today. The year 4930. If you divide it all by 28, all you have is 1 year. 30 hours to go for that year. And add 3 days. So we can see that the Tkufas Nisan will be Wednesday night, the night of Thursday, 6 hours into the night, 12 a.m. So add on to that 7.5 hours. Tkufas Tammuz will then be at 1.5 hours into the day of Thursday day, which means 7:30 a.m. Add 7.5 hours. Tkufas Tishrei will be at 9 hours into the day, which means 3 o'clock p.m. on Thursday. Add 7.5 hours further. Tkufas Teves will then be 4.5 hours into the night of Friday, Thursday night at 10:30 p.m. Adding another 7.5 hours, you will once again reach Tkufas Nisan Haba B'Tchilas Yom Shishi at 6 p.m. on 6 a.m. on Friday morning. And the same thing applies for the entirety of time, one tkufa after another. Says that I'm another calculation. In Tirza Leda Bekama Yom B'Chodesh. You want to know just the day of the month. You don't care about the day of the week. You don't care about anything. You want just the day of the month in Nisan. So the Rambam says the truth is you're going to have to go into this calculation already armed with the info of the previous calculation. You have to use the simplified calculation to figure out what day of the week it's going to be. You also have to know which day Nisan Beis Din will decide that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is going to be that year. You also have to know the Kama Shanim Gemuris Avru Min HaMachzor. Here the Rambam gets very approximate. You have to know how many years passed from the current 19-year cycle. Per year, take 11 days, not 10 days, 21 hours, a rounded lead of the sun over the moon, 11 days. Add on to this number 7 days nowadays. What the Rambam means is that, like I said before, in the beginning of creation, Tkufas Nisan preceded by 7 days. Over time, it got closer and closer till it actually surpassed. And by the Rambam's time, it was 7 days surpassed. Today, it's about 10, 11 days. So you have to add 10, 11 days, not 7 days. But you add 7 days in the Rambam's time, which brings you to where the Tkufas Nisan will essentially be around. Divide everything by 30. Instead of by lunar months, 29.5 days, you go again, Rambam's rounding it off, throw it by 30 days, because the 30 days are the leap months that have already contributed to aligning the sun and the moon during this current machzor. Whatever remains less than 30, now begin to count. You already know when Rosh Chodesh is going to be. That was part of going into it. You have to figure out when Rosh Chodesh will be. So knowing that, just count the days from Rosh Chodesh. If it matches to the day that you already have in the week, let's say you know from the week to fall out on Thursday, and Rosh Chodesh is going to be on Monday. So you're counting, and the tkufa reaches Thursday. Beautiful. So it matches. That's the tkufa. V'im lav, if not, don't worry. Just keep adding 1, 2, or 3 days because all the calculations were approximate. So we could kind of compensate for a discrepancy of about 3 days.
Was the approximation that we did 30 days instead of 29 and a half?
30, 11 per year, a bunch of approximations. So we're in a Vav of Perek Tes. So what you have to do is just keep adding. If you know that Tkufa is going to be on Thursday based on the weekday calculation, and according to your math just now, it came out to be on Monday. So you add 1, 2, 3, and you reach the Tkufa. That's it. Because you can, with all those round numbers, you can just assume that it got 3 days off. If that year is a leap year, then you actually have to begin counting from the second month of Adar, because that's technically the month after Adar. When Tkufas Nisan that year will be earlier. Even during 19-year cycles, even today, the Tkufa is always earlier in a leap year because we're aligning things that year. So the sun will enter 0 degrees at an earlier point. So the day that you have here in your calculation, you start adding from the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. Whatever day it reaches, that's when the Tkufa will be. Ketzad, for example, we wanted to know again the year 4930, the 9th year of the 260th Machzor. We know that Rosh Chodesh will be on Thursday. Utkufas Nisan will also be b'chamishi on a Thursday. Well, the Fisha is Hashanah Zu Chis Lamachzer, being that it's the 9th year in the cycle. So 8 complete years have passed. Take for each year 11 days. You call we get 88 days. Taisif Shiva add 7 days. Total of 59 days. Divided by 30. 95 days. Divided by 30, we have 5 days left. Which you know is going to be on Thursday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Sunday, Monday. But we already know Tkufa is going to be on a Thursday. So 3-day discrepancy, no problem. Add 1 day and another day until you reach the Thursday, which is the day of the Tkufa, and it says Tkufa is what you're doing is you're basically, you know when the Tkufa is during the week.
Right.
You also know when Aleph Nisan is.
Right.
Your approximated math had led you to understand how many days from Rosh Chodesh Nisan till the Tkufa.
Yeah.
But you already know what day of the week it is. So those have to match. If Rosh Chodesh is Thursday, and your math tells you that Tkufa is 5 days after Rosh Chodesh, that's going to be on a Monday. But from your weekday calculation, which is very exact, you know it's going to be on a Thursday. Can't be on Hamis, it's going to be on Ches. So you just go, okay, fine, Vav Zayin Ches, till it meets that next Thursday. And the reason that you can loosely add those days is because the way you even got to the 5-day remainder was through approximated calculations. So we can just, the Rambam says, I'm going to round it off here and then round it off in the end. So it comes out this year, Tkufas Nisan will be on Ches Nisan. You do it every year that way. The Rambam clarifies, when we say you just keep adding days, only 1, 2, or 3 days is the maximum. It's a very big rarity. You have to add 4 days. In a very exact position, if all the rounds, if all the approximations come together, there could be a 3-day and 12-hour discrepancy. So spanning 4 days. And then you'll have to add a 4th day to reach the day of the Tkufa. But it's very rare. If you found you have to add more than 3 days and maybe even 4, know that you made a mistake. The diktuk can do it again properly.
So in this year that the Tkufa falls out on Ches Nisan, they would not make it a leap year because it comes out before the 15th, like we learned in yesterday's Rambam.
That year actually happens to be a leap year. That year, yeah, that year would not be a leap year, yeah, but not because of that. Just because of where the solar and lunar calendars are aligned. It's got a bit of a different mechanism. See yesterday's round. Okay, so this entire Perek Tes was going with the mindset that solar years are 365 days and a quarter exactly. Every tkufa divided neatly. Therefore, you were able to figure out when in the week they could be a tkufa, just keep adding 30 hours. You also understand that every 28 years, the sun returns to the exact same position. This is not going to apply in the next Perek. Says that Rambam Shnas Hachama, the solar year Lemishu Eimershu Pachas Mediviyah. To he who says that it's 365 days and a bit less than a quarter of a day, Mechach Me Yisrael, from the sages of Israel. Yesh Misha Eimer, there's one opinion within that opinion, and that's what we're going to pick, that it's Shleish Meis Chamisha V'Shishim Yayim, 365 days, V'Chamesh Shayis Ucham Meis Shiva V'Tishim Chalakim. 5 hours, 997 chalakim, u'shmeina v'arboim rega. This is a new unit of time. V'harega echad mishisha v'shivim b'chilik. A rega is 1/76 of a chilik. So it's a very, very exact number. And it's not such a big difference. To go from 365 in 6 hours down to 5 hours, 997 chalakim is a difference of less than 100 chalakim. Talking about almost nothing. Yet, it's going to make a huge difference. According to this calculation, the lead of the solar year over the lunar year will not be 10/21/204, but rather asara yamim, 10 days, achas v'esrim shah, 21 hours, and a tiny bit less, 121 chalakim and 48 rega. Siman lehem yika kika mayach yud chaf aleph kuf aleph memches. The reason it's so important is by making this tiny discrepancy. Now, after 19 years, the solar and lunar calendars fully align. There's no differential of an hour and 45 chalakim. Nothing. 19 years, every 19 years, it's a beautiful conjunction or combination of the solar and lunar years. Every 19 years, the solar years and the lunar years, both the regular and the leap years, come fully together.
So the moon never catches up. We said it was getting closer and closer because the sun was 7 days ahead.
Well, that's only according to the Perek Test.
Right.
We're going to see in Perek Yud, there's going to be no, it's going to be very different.
Sounds like the Rambam holds by this.
Yes, we're going to see at the end of the Perek, it says that clearly. Halacha Beis. Bein kol tkufa lefi cheshbon zeh. According to this, between every tkufa is not very neat. It's not 91 days, 7.5 hours. It's echad b'tishim yayim, 91 days, sheva shoy, 7 hours, v'chamesh meyes v'tisha asur chalakim, and 519 chalakim, ve'echad u'shleishim rega. Siman lehem, tzadik aleph zayin, tafkuf yotes, lamed aleph. Ukesheteda tkufa min tkufa is emes achaysa. If you know when a given tkufa was, tachshev me'oisei rega minyan zeh. It's a very tedious math. If to do it in your head, counting all these regayim up, v'teda tkufa shachara, and know the following tkufa al derech shebi'anu b'tkufa shamashi revia, as we explained according to the other cycle, which is exactly a quarter of the 366 day. Same thing over here. Now, Tkufas Nisan lefi cheshbon zeh, says the Rambam, Haisa b'shana rishona shel yitzira koydem meilad Nisan. The lead of the first Tkufas Nisan, before the first meilad Nisan of creation, was not 7 days, 9 hours, 6:42, but rather just a flat tesha shoyes sheish meish 9 hours, 6:42, no full week. Siman lehem test harma. And because every 19 years it comes right back, so too forever. The chol shana rishenim in amachsar, every first year of a cycle, koydem meilad nisan metesha shoyes sheish meish 9 chalakim. It precedes the meilad by 9:42.
Less than a minute difference, right?
1942. Yeah, less than a minute difference. Now, why is this? I said before, according to Perek Yud, the world was created in Nisan. So unlike Perek Tes, where the Tkufas Nisan and meilad Nisan were all theoretical, according to this Perek, they're actual. The first actual Tkufas Nisan was Tuesday night, 6 p.m. The first actual meilad Nisan was Wednesday morning, 9 hours and 642 hours into the day. Meilad Tishrei would be at Friday morning, 8 a.m. But meilad Nisan, which was Wednesday morning, post-creation, according to this Manda Amar, was an actual meilad. So the first Kufa happened Tuesday night. The first meilad happened Wednesday morning, with a simple difference of 9 hours. And so from now on, those 9 hours keep on meeting once again every 19 years. The lead of the Tkufa over the meilad. The first Tkufa, Tuesday night, 6 p.m. First meilad was the next morning. Yeah. The Mefarshim struggle to explain what that means. It basically means that Hashem had to hang his sun and the moon in different positions at the beginning of the day, so that by 9 hours later, the moon would reach the sun. We think that Hashem put them both at the beginning of 0 degrees. There was a Tkufa and a meilad right at the beginning, but it wasn't that way. Hashem put the sun right at 0 degrees, but he put the moon a bit behind so that 9 hours later it would catch up to 0 degrees, and the meilad would happen. Follow me?
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that every 19 years, everything returns to its original position, and the Tkufas Nisan is always before by 9 hours and 642 chalakim. When you know Tkufas Nisan Shel Shana Rishona Min HaMachzer. Once you know Tkufas Nisan of the first year of any Machzer, Tachshev Mimena Echa V'Tishim Yom Sheva Shoyes Chamesh Meis Tisha Yosef Chalakim Ve'echa V'Shleishim Regal L'Chol Tkufa Add Sefer Machzer, as I said before, you just keep adding 91 days, 7 hours, 519 Chalakim, 31 Rega, and you get every Tkufa. Im Tirtza Leida Masay Tiyat Tkufas Nisan Lefi Cheshbon Zeh. If you want to get the Tkufa of any given year according to this Cheshbon, so obviously, if you're in the first year of a cycle, nothing is required. You just know it's 9 hours before Moed Nisan. But if it's in the middle of a machzer, even according to this cycle in Perek Yud, every year, the solar year is ahead of the lunar year by about 10 days. So you have to make up for that differential because that's just what's happening. Over the years, as the calendar is being set up and leap years are being accounted for, there's going to be a little difference. So how do you find the tkufa in the middle of a machzer? Figure out how many complete years have passed in the cycle. And take for every year the lead of the solar over the lunar calendar. That's 10 days, 21 hours, 121 chalakim, 48 rega. Every 76 regaim turn into a chelek. Every 1,080 chalakim turn into an hour. The same way you do with the mildas. And then subtract from everything the inherent lead of the sun over the moon. 9 hours and 642 chalakim. The hanisha and whatever remains, you follow the same process as Perek Tes. Divide by lunar months. Those are the months that have already been converted into leap months and have contributed to the alignment of the solar and lunar calendars. The hanisha and whatever remains, she'ein bo chodesh levana, which does not have a lunar month, add it to whenever Nisan will be that year, the Moed Nisan will be that year, and whatever rega the number comes to, that will be Kufas Nisan of that year. So verses in Perek Tes, where you had to first gather up all the remainders of the 19-year cycles, because that was closing the gap of Tekufa in relation to Moed. In Perek Yud, there's no gap, because every 19 years you go back to position 0, a 9-hour lead. So you're only dealing within this specific machzer. So you take the leads of every single year, add them up, and make the cheshbon. Says the Rambam Malach Vav, v'nidin li advarim, it seems to me, as you mentioned before, shal cheshbon tkufa zu hayuseimchin le'inin berashana be'ez shebeis dan agad l'matzoi. When the Beis Din was around and they wanted to know when to make leap years, we went yesterday that the tkufa could be a big sign for that, depending on when the sun's going to enter 0 degrees. They would use this tkufa. When they used to make a ibriyar intercalate a year because of the time or because of the needs, they would use this one. Because this calculation is more true than the first one. The Rebbe is medayik. Adam says more true, not true. More true. More true means the first one's also true, which is why in halacha we actually follow Perek Tes for many things, for Birchas Hachama, as I mentioned before, etc. It also matches more closely with those principles that we have in astronomy than the first calculation, where we said that the solar year is 365 and a quarter. Says that Rambam, the cheshbon state tkufis a big caveat. All the calculations of both tkufas, whether Perek Tes or Perek Yud, that we explain their paths, hakel b'kedovu, is all an approximation. And only aligns with the sun's mean position, its average travel, not in its true position. In the true position of the sun, Tkufas Nisan will in reality be 2 days before, about 2 days before the day which comes out for these 2 tkufas, whether Perek Tes or Perek Yud. I have here a slide I want to show you for a quick second. I hope this is going to work out over here. Share the screen. Here we go. You can see over here a very important principle about the sun and the moon's orbit. This is the sun's orbit because we're talking about the tkufa, so we're going to be talking about the sun. You can see that the backdrop against which we measure the sun's movement is the outer circle, the Galgal Hamazolis. How do we know which degree the sun is at? We figure out which degree against the backdrop of the outer circle the sun is on. However, as you can see, the sun's own orbit, it's off center. The center isn't Earth. The center is that orange dot right next to it. So what happens if the sun, look at the left picture, it's at what does it say over there? 90 degrees, 100 degrees, whatever it says over there. You can see that if you would look from the center of the sun's orbit, the degree in the Galgal Hamazolis that it would meet would be closer to 90 degrees. When you're observing from Earth, though, and you cross the path of the sun, even though on its own orbit it's at 90 degrees, it's going to meet the Galgal Hamazolis at about 80 degrees. That's called Mokim Amiti. Mokim Emtsoi means the path of the sun relative to its own orbit. See, the sun travels 1 degree every day. That's on its own little circle. But when you're viewing it from Earth, it's actually going to look like some days the sun is making a shorter journey and some days longer because the orbit is off center. Like you can see in the other picture on the right, it's at 270 degrees. So over there, again, from the center of the sun's orbit, it looks like 270. From the center of Earth, it's a little bit past that, 280 almost. I think it's 285. It's a very big difference. Essentially, what this means is,
One second, I'm sorry, the outer circle that you have there,
yeah,
that's the orbit of what?
that's the constellations.
That's constellations.
That's called the ecliptic.
Okay.
That's typically what we measure. For us, looking out into the sky, we can identify those stars. And when we see the sun or moon passing by those stars, that's how we label where the sun and moon are. But in reality, they're making a little circle in their own orbit. It doesn't directly match the ecliptic. It's a bit off center. So in a way, what happens is that two of the quarters of the year become longer and two of the tkufas become shorter. Because when one circle is pushed off the center of another circle, if you divided the outer circle into 4 equal slices, it's going to intersect at the inner circle at a bit of a different angle, right? It's not going to split the inner circle into exactly 4 pieces. The pizza pie is going to divide a little bit off. So this quarter and this quarter is going to be smaller. This quarter and that quarter is going to be bigger.
Right. Okay.
So hence, for the sun to enter 0 degrees for us on the Galgal Hamazoles, as we look out from Earth, is going to happen about 2 days before than it would happen relative to its own orbit. Somebody looking from the center of the sun's orbit out into the Galgal Hamazoles would see the sun meet 0 degrees 2 days later. But because we're on Earth, from a bit of a tilted perspective, now we're going to see it about 2 days earlier. So the Rambam just lets you know that you should know that the Tkufas happened a little bit earlier. The reason why he does so is because the Mefarshim say that the whole point of Perek Yud is to bring out how the Tkufa is going to be at a much more exact time. But even according to Perek Yud, if you do the math, every 16th year of a cycle, in year 16, the Tkufa will be after Pesach, which is a problem. Because the whole Perek Yud came to solve that problem, that Tkufa should always be before Pesach. But in year 16, that was going to be after Pesach. By telling us in this halacha that it's going to be 2 days before, so the Rambam corrects that even according to Perek Yud, even in that 16th year, the real Tkufa is on the 14th of Nisan, 2 days before, huh?
That's a good fix.
So in the average way, it doesn't get fixed.
19 years it gets fixed.
Yeah, every 19 years it comes back to the
In
position.
the beginning of Perek Tes, so it said that there's two.
Stop this year, yeah.
In the beginning of Tes,
How
it
do I
says
do
that
that?
there's 2 opinions. One is
Stop
Chachmei
the shit.
Yisrael,
Yes.
and then one is.
No, the Rambam says that
Yavnei
Chachmei
Paras.
Yisrael argued on it. They're both Chachmei Yisrael, and they're also Chachmei Yavnei Paras that argued over it.
But the more true one is Yavnei Paras, the way they went.
No, Chachmei Yisrael, they're both opinions in Jewish law. They're both Chachmei Yisrael.
Uh-huh.
Both opinions were adopted by different Chachamim in the Yidden. Both opinions were adopted by different Chachamim in the Greeks. There was the Goyim had to support both, and the Yidden had to support both. All right, moving on. Perek Yud Aleph. Some say from Perek Yud Aleph till Perek Yud Tes was added by the Rambam later. Till here is all the principles you have to know for practical Kidush Hachodesh, deciding when the new month is and when leap years go into the calendar. From here and forward, we're going to be learning about the back end, what went into figuring out when Rosh Chodesh is. Nothing to do with actual practical halacha necessarily. That, as the Rambam himself says, we said in these halachas, the Bezdin would calculate exactly the Yodim in Yirah, and know whether the moon could be sighted or not on the night following the Moilad. Yodanu, we know, says the Rambam, anybody who has a proper spirit and whose heart desires to wisdom and to always know the secrets, certainly will want to know the ways that Bezdin used to calculate. Until a person could know whether or not the moon will be sighted. The darchei hacheshbon, the exact method to arrive at the calculation. Yesh ben machlekes gedolos ben chachmei hagoyim hakadmonim. There's great arguments among the early Goyish sages. Shechakru al cheshbon at kufos v'gamatriyos, who delved deeply into astronomy, into geometry. V'anashim chachamim gedolim mishtabshu ben, great wise men made big mistakes. From this alma me'an dvarim, they lost track of certain things. And doubts creeped up for them. Some people went so exact and still and didn't catch the proper calculation. As the Gemara uses the expression, he dove into deep waters and came up with just pottery. It says that however, by the length of days and by many calculations and checkings that we have done, and investigations, some wise men got to know the ways of this calculation. Furthermore, says the Rambam, Jews have an advantage. In these principles, we have tradition from our Chachamim, and proofs that were not written down in the well-known Sfarim. And for all these reasons, kosher be'enai, is fitting in my eyes, to explain the ways of this calculation, so that it should be ready for he who desires to fill his heart and come close to the work to do it. The al do not treat these ways lightly, says the Rambam. Just because we don't have to need them these days, we have a fixed calendar. Don't treat them lightly. These are very deep and very far paths. This is the secret of Ibur, of making the calendar, which the great wise men knew, the great sages knew, and were not given over to everybody, among those that had smicha and were men of understanding. But the fixed calendar nowadays, when there's no beis din, which we do nowadays, I feel to make a shobis rabban, magian at seifei b'shleisha barba yamim. Even school children reach them in 3-4 days. Very interesting remez. The Rabbi made a takanat in 3 prakim Rambam. The first 10 prakim Kidush Hachodesh takes us 3-4 days to learn. Right? 10 chapters, 3 days, 3 chapters. So in 3-4 days, even school children can finish this whole thing. But now we're starting a whole new part of Kidush Hachodesh. This is a whole new thing. New, getting deep into the calculations. Shema yizbayin chacham mechachmei u'mes mechachmei Yisrael shalomdu chachmas yavam b'drachim yeloshanim mechashvan b'desei reach. Says the Rambam, I'm going to give you the calculations, but I know there's going to be some non-Jewish sages or even Jewish sages who have learned Greek wisdom, and they're going to see my calculations. They're going to see approximations in some of my paths. The Yala Daite is going to think that I forgot about something, I missed something, and I missed the fact that there was an approximation there. Al Yalazal Daite, do not think that. If we weren't exact about something, it's because we have a good reason for it. We know the principles of geometry, trigonometry, in proper proofs. It's not going to cause any lack in knowing when the sighting will be. Don't worry about it. Therefore, we weren't exact about it. And so too, you're going to see me lacking something. It's going to be missing. The kavanah is that we did it with intent. Because we're going to add later on. And I did it all for the express purpose of making this calculation come as easy as possible, but still retaining its truth. So a person shouldn't get overwhelmed. Was not used to these things with multiple calculations that anyways don't help anything for sighting the moon. So the Rambam says the principles that a person has to know for any type of astronomical calculations, whether it's for sighting the moon or for anything else, these they are. Hagalgal, every circle, is split into 360 degrees. And the same is true of the outermost sphere of the world. It's divided into 360 degrees. And we divide them by 12 mazolis. Kol mazal mazal, every group of stars, every cluster of stars, takes up 30 degrees of the circle. It begins from the constellation of Aries. Every degree can further be divided into 60 minutes, not minutes in time, minutes in space. Every minute divided into seconds, 60 seconds, and every second further into 60 thirds. You can go even further if you want, make fourths and fifths, whatever floats your boat. The Fichach therefore says that if the calculation tells you that a certain star is on the ecliptic at 70 miles, 30 chalakim and 40 shniyos, Teda, you should know, Shekeichav Zeh, who mazel ta'im, and this star is in the mazel of Gemini, Bechatzi Maila Achas Eser Mazel Zeh, halfway through the 11th degree, because 70 miles means you've crossed 30 of Aries, 30 of the ox, what's it called, Taurus, and then 10 into Gemini. Mazel Tleh Shleishim miles, Mazel Sher Shleishim miles, Nishar Eser miles from after Mazel Ta'im, so you're remaining with 10 miles and a half from the third one, and 40 seconds of the second half of that degree. So too, if a star is located at 320 degrees on the ecliptic, Taylor, you should know that this keichav is on the mazel of the bucket, whatever that's called in English, the Esrim miles by 20 degrees into it. So do with all numbers. The Seder HaMazal is Kachu. This is the order of the constellations. Aquarius, yes. Tala is Aries, Sher is Taurus, Tammuz is Gemini, Sartan is Cancer, Arya is Leo, Sula is Virgo, Maznaim is Libra, Akrav is, what is that? Scorpio, Keshes is Sagittarius, Gedi, Capricorn, Dli is Aquarius, and Dagim is Pisces. Hachashbein is Kulam, all of the calculations. It says that I'm another principle. When you have to add a remainder to a remainder, when you're adding numbers to numbers, called mine. First, get all the groups of numbers together. And then you see, if you get to 60 seconds, turn them into a minute. If you get 60 minutes, turn it into a degree. And when the degrees come together, since a circle has no beginning and no end, so once you cross 360, you're back to zero. Whatever remains under 360, that's what we care about for calculations.
When did we get into minutes and these half minutes? Before we were just dealing with halakha, it's 1080, right?
Those were 1080 of time. This is now in space. In every degree of a circle, there are 60 minutes. It doesn't mean a minute of time. It means there's just 60 units. It's also called minutes.
Space. Okay.
Yeah, minutes of space. Halacha Yud Aleph. B'chol hachashbeinos kulam in all calculations. When you want to subtract a number from another, what happens if the number that you are subtracting is greater than the number that you're subtracting from? Even with one chilek. So you can't minus 20 from 10. It doesn't work. So what do? Let's just add another 360. And it'll bring you back to the circle. It's simple math. Keita, how does this work? Rambam picks the perfect, type where all three numbers don't match. You have to take away 250 and 40 from 120 and 30. So the first thing you do is add to the 100 degrees 360. So you have Yil HaMailas, Arba Meishishim, you have 460 degrees. Okay, but you have to start from the end, from the seconds. You can't minus degrees before you minus the seconds because they're the smaller unit of time, of space. So you begin to subtract the seconds from the seconds. You can't do 40 from 30. So what you do is tarim chelik echad. Like I tell you in school, you cross out the thing, you turn it into a 1, right? You take one chelik from the 20 chalakim. The tasa shishim shniyas converted into 60. Pesach v'ashishim added to the 30. The shniyas tishma had 90 seconds. 90 minus 40 works. Tiknam yamar abayim. Yishar 50 shniyas. We're left with 50 shniyas. Very good. Tasa the grei 50 chalakim mitishas chalakim. Now you're going to come to the minutes, and you want to subtract 50 from 19. Why not from 20? Shekvar harim ma'isam chilek echad. You already took one chilek and made it into the seconds, so you have 19 chalakim. You can't take 50 from 19. Take one of the degrees, mina milas. And make it into 60 minutes. Adding it to the 19. So you now have 79 chalakim. Take away the 50. You show a tisha the esrim chalakim. You're left with 29 chalakim. Beautiful.
Why does he mention 360
first? I'm not sure why. It's interesting.
Yeah,
because he's going backwards anyways. Yeah. And now when he comes to the 100, he should say, okay, now take away at 360. It's an interesting question. You already took 1 degree, converted it into minutes. So now you subtract the 200 from the 459. You share Masayim Matesha V'chamisha Milas. You have 259. The Nimtza Hashar Simona Simone Ranat, Chavtes Nun. Very good. And so too with every subtraction. The last two words are Hashemesh Vayareach are put to the next halacha in most editions.
Rambam said they're not.
They're not. Chassidus in the halacha, exactly. Rambam before davening, also a little Chassidus before davening. Exactly. It says that Rambam Hashemesh Vayareach V'chein Sha'ar Hashiva Kechavim. The sun, the moon, and all 7 planets, major planets, has a steady pace. It never gets lighter, never gets heavier, meaning faster or slower. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, every day, same thing. However, here the Rambam makes the point that I made earlier, the orbit of every single one of them, even though it surrounds Earth, Earth isn't its center, it's off center. The Fiqh therefore says that were you to compare the path, the orbit of every one of these planets against the backdrop of the ecliptic which surrounds the world and the Earth is in the center of that, you will notice that its path seems to change. It looks like some days making more distance, some days covering less distance on its own orbit to steady pace. But for your view, it's going to be differing paces.
Even though the calculations are uniform vis-a-vis the Earth, right?
That's right. And the Earth is in their center. So they stay in their place. But when the sun is moving against their backdrop, you're going to observe it as, oh, here's 1 degree, here's 2 degrees. Here, today, the sun went from 1 to 2. Tomorrow, the sun goes from 2 to 3.5. How did that work? That's because you've crossed that line which intersects the center of the sun's orbit. So for you, it looks like it's covering more degrees. Because from your angle, the 1 degree that it's really going looks like more. Think of, you see, I'm sitting over here, yeah? What's behind my phone? So for you, behind my phone is there. For you, behind my phone is over there. Because you have 2 different views. So even though that wall, back wall, or the whole shoal, let's say, surrounds us, which part of the wall you're going to observe depends where you're standing. So if the Earth is in the middle, and it's
this is what they call retrograde. Like when they say Mercury's in retrograde, it's from your perspective, it looks like it's going backwards, but really it's going forwards.
There you go. That's another good example. Right. Because it's going forward relative to itself. Relative to your view, it's going backwards. It can happen sometimes. So the point is that you will observe faster and slower paces, even though it has an even pace. Yeah, Isaac Rosen. So
I can tell you live in LA. In New York, we don't know about retrogrades and things like that.
You said in LA they know about retrograde, not in New York.
Yeah, we don't know these things. The mean path, the equal, the steady pace that each planet makes in its own orbit is called the middle of the path. So later on, we're going to see terms like Emtza HaShemesh, Emtza HaYareach. That means the path that the sun makes on its orbit relative to itself. Steady pace. But the path which is observed against the ecliptic, which looks like sometimes more and sometimes less, is called the true path. And that's where we'll measure the true position of the sun or the moon. We already said that we only care about sighting the moon. We don't care about the rest of the things and how it matters with everything, all other planets at all. So we made a beginning point that I'm going to say, I've done the math for you up until this year. I'm going to tell you where everything is during this year. And you can continue from that year on forward. I'm giving you what's called the Shnas HaIker, the beginning point. From where we always begin for these calculations. It's going to be Wednesday night, the night of Thursday, which is Gimel Nisan, Mishana Zu. From this year, the Rambam says, which year is this year? The 17th year of the 260th cycle. 4938. Which is the year 1489 to documents. That's through Alexander the Great. 1,109 years to the Churban, which is what we call the Shnasa Iker. This raises the famous stira that in Perek Tes, that Rambam said that we're in the year 4930, not the year 4938. So which year are we in? 4938 or 4930? It gets worse. In the Hachodesh Rambam,
What does he mean, we, him himself?
Yeah, himself. This year. He says this
He's
year.
just using this year as an example, right? And he's gonna use this year as an example moving
All
forward.
throughout. Yeah.
Right.
But he labels himself as being during that year, the year 4938. And earlier he said 4930. And there's another place where it says 4936 and 4937. It's a bunch of different years in the Rama.
Why is that an issue? You could have wrote it for a while.
So what doesn't make sense is that between two prakim, it should have taken him 8 years. From Perek Test to Perek Yud, it took him 8 years.
No, but you said he could have written this
Ah,
later.
Oh, so some Mefarshim want to say Taka, that these last prakim were written later. They were like an addendum. The Rambam wrote that Rambam in the year 4930. And the 4938 is like, let me add in these last couple of prakim. That's some people say. But the problem is that other parts of the Rambam, which were part of the Rambam, like Shemitah V'Yovel, says clear 4937. So what do you do with that? 4936, one of the two. So the Rebbe says in the letter, and then later on when the Rambam started, he gave a whole sikha on this, that the Rambam wrote it over many years. It's obvious that to create the Rambam took a number of years. And the Rambam was constantly correcting and editing his work. However, he only edited that which needed editing. So it says Perek Tes in the year 4930 was finished and was complete. It was a perfect work. So that's there. Perek Yud Aleph, where he got into the complicated cheshbonos, he reworked it, re-edited it, and by the time he re-edited its final draft, it was already the year 4938. And so because of that, he continued throughout till Perek Yud Tes with that year, because he had to change it all to fit. But it was a matter of editing. And Akdama was 2 years earlier, the whole thing, and afterwards they had the whole back and forth in writing. It's still not so clear, the exact, because there's a couple of problems with this mahalach. But that's the basic answer. Final halacha, halacha Yud Zayin. Oh, this is very important. The sighting of the moon only is going to be, or only matters in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, asinu kol darchei cheshbon hazeh benuyim al ir Yerushalayim. We have built all calculations to be correct for Yerushalayim. And the 6 or 7 day radius around. Because that's where we're going to see the moon. Then they can come to testify in Beis Din. Says that I'm going to give you the coordinates for this. It's north of the equator. Between 29 and 35 degrees north. From the prime meridian, it's west of what he calls the middle, basically, of the earth. From 21 to 27, essentially, degrees in longitude. So all times, all calculations, all places of sun and moon are going to match that place. We're in California, it's going to be completely different because our horizon is different, our sunset times, everything is different. But in Yerushalayim, where it mattered, that's where all calculations are going to be. Very good. Okay.
Thank you very much. Are you applying for a full-time job?
I am not,
Shucks.
The next 2 days, Samach.
but I'll be here tomorrow and Friday.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Of course, they put that here because is that in today's Rambam?
This one at the end. Yeah.
Maybe because they wanted to make it more